Joining me now, we have Washington Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. She serves on the House Judiciary, Foreign Affairs and Budget Committees and is the Democratic Caucus Senior Whip. It is good to see you again, Congresswoman. Thank you for joining me. You just heard Todd Blanche say he would listen to the president's opinion on prosecutions, using that rather absurd example of violent crime, right? No one's going to argue going after violent criminals. But do you worry that approach will extend to political enemies?
Alex, it's good to see you. I always worry about that. And it's exactly why I said Todd Blanche should not be confirmed, because everything that he has done at the Department of Justice, and even his slip up and his testimony where he said he was Donald Trump's personal attorney, that is the philosophy he carries into the role as Attorney General. And it's incredibly dangerous. The DOJ is supposed to be the people's lawyer, not the president's lawyer. And what he has been doing over and over again is essentially greenlighting everything that the president wants to do, whether or not it is for the benefit of the people, whether or not it's constitutional. He's hidden the Epstein files. He was the mastermind behind not releasing the Epstein files. And he has consistently, even with the fund for the January 6th insurrectionists, he is not committing now to not ensuring that there are payouts. He's just saying it won't be in the same form as before, as your reporter said. So I have been worried. It's why I said that the Senate should not confirm him. And I'm disappointed that they did, because I think it's a massive step backwards for this country and for the people of the United States, who no longer have a people's attorney as the head lawyer as Attorney General of the Department of Justice.
So top Oversight Committee Democrat Robert Garcia condemned a DOJ memo asserting President Trump can claim executive privilege over communications with his private advisors, potentially making it easier for him to withhold information from Congress and the courts. Let's listen to what he said yesterday.
Imagine now any investigation that Democrats are trying to move forward, subpoenas, Todd Blanche coming back and saying, actually, we're going to say we're going to use executive privilege and not release these documents. So this is about hiding corruption. It's about allowing the president to do whatever he wants to do. We believe, by the way, this is illegal, unconstitutional, and won't stand up in court, and we're going to fight it in the courts. But the fact that they're so brazen and open about it now just goes to show you that Todd Blanche is in it to continue to defend Donald Trump.
So could executive privilege apply and allow the White House to shield allies and advisors from congressional subpoenas? And what can Congress realistically do if the administration refuses to comply?
Well, we're going to have to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court, obviously, and that has concerns because the Supreme Court has been captured by a small group of Donald Trump's supporters, and it is also not acting in the interests of the American people. I actually am part of a group of members of Congress that have the last remaining lawsuit against Donald Trump, and this concept of executive privilege, which he has been trying to use since the January 6th insurrection and is continuing to try to use. The fact that this was the first thing that Todd Blanche did in coming in shows how worried they are about the accountability that we as Democrats intend to exercise when we take back the House and the Senate, and hopefully in the next presidential, the White House as well. We have to do this kind of accountability, and they are trying to do everything they can now to stop us. But we're going to fight it all the way, and the public will be with us, I believe, because the public sees that they don't want a president that has absolute authority. That is not something that is in their benefit, as we're seeing right now with this horrific war of choice, unauthorized, unconstitutional war of choice in Iran that's driving prices up for Americans across the country.
So Senate Judiciary Committee Democrats, they are challenging Blanche over alleged misuse of DOJ resources, including the efforts to now work around the now defunct anti-weaponization fund, which you have referenced here. The senators pointed to 4 settlements, including paying almost $5 million to the estate of Capitol rioter Ashley Babbitt. But what oversight authority does the Judiciary Committee have to stop taxpayer dollars from being used to compensate Trump's allies, including violent Capitol rioters?
Well, this is obviously something that's going to end up in the courts again. But I do think that the best oversight we have is to change the leadership of the House and the Senate, which refuses to exercise its constitutional rights to challenge this president. I mean, that is where we are, Alex. And it is a very scary time in this country for so many people, because they are seeing that if you have a party in the majority that refuses to exercise its rights as Congress in terms of oversight and accountability, it makes it very, very difficult, particularly if you have a captured Supreme Court as well. So we're going to continue to use every means at our disposal, from the courts to public opinion and to winning the elections, so that we have, once again, a check on an out-of-control president who is literally tearing down the walls that the founders built to protect our democracy.
I want to get your thoughts on the USS Lincoln, because it has been at sea now for more than 250 days amid reports of chronic sanitation issues, deteriorating mental health among the crew. MS Now and others report some sailors have actually tried to jump overboard, but the president shrugged off these conditions, saying the carrier hasn't been deployed nearly long enough. Your thoughts?
This is a remarkably cruel form of gaslighting that the president is engaging with against our troops, against the families of these troops that have committed their lives to the security and the safety of the United States. It is remarkable, and yet it's not, because it happens over and over again, to see the lack of empathy, the lack of recognition of what has happened. Most of the crew has not even been to port since December of last year. And this is far beyond the recommended 7-month deployment that the Navy had said that they wanted to achieve. But at a minimum, to recognize that this war of choice, as I called it before, and I still believe it is a war of choice, it is unconstitutional. He never got approval from Congress to do this. This is not only causing incredible pain to the service members who are protecting our country every day, but also to Americans across the country. I just saw that Moody's has an analysis that this war against Iran has cost now $100 billion in increased military taxpayer costs, as well as in terms of rising gas prices, grocery prices. An average of about $1,000 per family that people are paying more because Donald Trump screwed this all up and went to war without a plan, without an exit strategy, and with absolutely no empathy or recognition of what this means for our troops and for Americans across the country.
Sobering there. So the big question for Democrats this month was whether progressives could win statewide primaries in swing states. I know you campaigned with Peggy Flanagan and Matt Little in Minnesota, who both won their races, while Democratic Socialist Francesca Hong fell short in the state's gubernatorial primary. But what are your overall takeaways from these races and other recent progressive victories? And are there parallels to the Tea Party's rise among Republicans almost 20 years ago?
Well, I always reject comparisons to the Tea Party because progressives have always been about advancing things that are good for Americans, things like universal health care, universal child care, bringing down costs, making life affordable so that families can thrive, not just barely survive, and taking on the billionaires and the giant corporations that are literally stealing money from people every single day. It was so exciting, Alex, to campaign in Michigan and Minnesota for Peggy Flanagan and Matt Little in Minnesota, and then for Abdul El-Sayed in Michigan, because what they did was mobilize a whole group of voters that had given up on both parties and that literally did not see people standing up and fighting for them. These candidates took on enormous amounts of money. You know, in Abdul's race, it was about $60 to $80 million of outside spending against Abdul. Matt Little's race, it was over $3.5 million for a congressional seat against a blue dog that was one of the founders of the Blue Dogs, a conservative Democrat. He won overwhelmingly with over 17 points and much less money. And in Peggy Flanagan's race, over $20 million against her, and yet she won. What is the consistent message across this? It is really that if you fight for the people, if you stand up for Medicare for all, something that all three candidates actively campaigned on because they recognize the healthcare system is broken and people should not go sick and bankrupt in the richest country in the world because of healthcare. If you take on the corporations and the billionaires, if you fight for money to be spent here instead of on killing children, babies overseas, you will win. And I think that is a really important lesson. In terms of Wisconsin, I didn't campaign in Wisconsin, but I will say that while that race has been cast by some people as sort of a rejection, I would just say this is a candidate, Francesca Hong, who got within 3,000 votes of winning this election with zero money, campaigned in rural areas, won rural counties on similar messaging. And so I think that, again, it's really important to recognize people are sick and tired of parties, both parties, that don't stand up to giant corporations and billionaires that are taking money away from them. And they want bold, progressive ideas that are about bringing universal health care to people, bringing childcare to people, and lowering the cost of their everyday lives. That is what we need to be fighting for as a Democratic Party. And I'm proud that we have so many candidates that are engaging in that, and that I've been so involved in helping those candidates to win.
Well, I'm sure they appreciate your assistance. So on to November 3rd and the big election. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. It's so good to see you. Appreciate your time.
It's so great to see you, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you.